Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling someone truly iconic.
Absolutely. We're going behind, well, maybe through that famous smile.
Leonardo da Vinci, the Renaissance man.
That's the label, isn't it? Polymath. But it almost doesn't capture it.
Right. Because he's so famous for the Mona Lisa, the Last Supper.
Yeah, the big ones. But that fame, it sort of overshadows, well, everything else he did.
And there was so much else. That's our mission today, really, to kind of rescue the rest of Leonardo.
Exactly. We're digging into the sources, pulling out the essential stuff, the surprising bits.
Focusing on, the sheer range of his interests, beyond just the painting.
We want to get at the universal genius, not just Leonardo the artist.
So give us the basics again. Leonardo di Ser Piero da Vinci.
Born 1452, died 1519, Italian polymath, high Renaissance.
And that list of titles.
It's almost ridiculous. Painter, draftsman, engineer, scientist, theorist, sculptor, architect. It just keeps going.
It's exhausting just hearing it.
And it highlights that duality you mentioned.
Yeah, the initial fame versus the legacy now.
Right. His fame then was definitely built on the painting. He was seen as this incredible artist.
But now, when we think of him,
now, I'd argue he's just as famous, maybe even more so for us interested in, the history of ideas, for his notebooks.
Those legendary notebooks.
It's 13,000 pages. Think about that. 13,000 surviving pages of notes, drawings.
Covering what? Everything.
Pretty much. Anatomy, astronomy, botany, maps, engineering designs, war machines, flying machines.
It's the map of his brain, basically.
It really is. Constantly observing, analyzing, sketching.
But, okay, before we get lost in the notebooks, we do need to ground him in the art world first. Founder of the High Renaissance.
Definitely. Which is kind of amazing when you think he has, fewer than 25 major attributed works?
And a lot of those are unfinished.
Famously unfinished, yet the influence is just immense, Western canon-defining stuff.
You mentioned the big two.
Mona Lisa. Probably the world's most famous painting, period.
No argument there.
And The Last Supper. The most reproduced religious painting ever.
In Vitruvian Man, that drawing is everywhere.
It's a cultural icon, yeah. And he achieved all this despite, seemingly being distracted half the time.
Always chasing the next idea.
Exactly.
Okay, one last clarification before we dive into his life. The name.
Ah, yes. Leonardo di Ser Piero da Vinci.
Meaning.
Leonardo, son of Ser Piero. From Vinci.
So Da Vinci isn't like Smith or Jones's.
Nope. It just tells you where he was from. Vinci, this little town near Florence. Not a family name.
Got it. Okay, let's start at the beginning. His foundations. Unconventional is putting it mildly.
Absolutely critical to understanding him. Born April 15th, 1452. Crucially, out of wedlock.
In or near Vinci, that Tuscan hill town.
Right, and that out-of-wedlock status is huge. His father, Ser Piero, was a successful legal notary, Florentine establishment.
But his mother?
Caterina di Maiolipi, lower class, a world away from Ser Piero's status.
So a real mix of social strata right from birth.
And it led to a somewhat detached upbringing. His parents married other people soon after he was born. He ended up mostly in his grandfather's house.
And loads of half-siblings he barely knew.
16 legitimate ones, yeah. Very little contact, apparently.
This background, it leads to this educational gap, you called it.
Yeah, which becomes kind of central. Despite the family being full of notaries, Leonardo only got basic informal schooling.
Reading, writing in Italian, basic math.
That's about it. No Latin, no Greek, none of the deep classical education that boys of his father's class would typically get.
Why not? Was it the illegitimacy?
Possibly, partly that, but also, the theory goes, his artistic talent was just so obvious so early on.
That they thought, okay, let's focus on that.
Exactly. Maybe they saw that as his path, rather than the traditional scholarly one he was sort of excluded from anyway.
And this lack of formal classics, it actually helped him.
Arguably, yes. It forced him to learn differently. Not from ancient books, but from looking, from experimenting, direct observation.
Hands-on learning, literally.
Precisely. Though that lack of Latin did cause problems later when he tried to organize his scientific work. We'll get to that.
But first, that childhood memory. Or fantasy. The kite.
Oh, yeah, from the Codex Atlanticus. He wrote about it when studying bird flight, recalled a kite, a big bird of prey coming down to his cradle.
And doing what?
Opening his mouth with its tail. Bizarre.
Very. Real memory. Symbolism.
Who knows? Commentators still argue. Was it real or a later projection of his lifelong obsession with flight? Either way, it shows this intense inner life rooted in watching nature right from the start.
And that observational skill quickly found an outlet. Mid-1460s, Florence.
Right, the family moves to Florence, the heart of everything exciting then. Around age 14, he becomes a garzone.
A studio boy.
Apprentice.
Yep, in the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio.
And Verrocchio's workshop was the place to be, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Verrocchio was the top guy in Florence, then painter, sculptor, goldsmith. The training was incredibly broad.
Not just drawing and painting. Oh no. Drafting, chemistry, metallurgy, metalworking, casting plaster, leatherwork, mechanics, woodwork, and painting and sculpting.
So he's learning the craft, but also the science behind it all. How things are made, how they work.
That's the key. It wasn't just aesthetics. It was material science, engineering, mechanics. This is where the polymath gets forged.
And the stories about his talent start early. Vasari's anecdotes.
Yeah, the famous one about Verrocchio's baptism of Christ. Leonardo collaborates, paints one angel.
The one on the left holding the robe.
That's the one. Supposedly, it was just so much better than Verrocchio's own work.
Using that newfangled oil paint, right? Smoother blending.
Exactly. Verrocchio was still using tempera.
Yeah.
The story goes, Verrocchio saw Leonardo's angel and just quit painting, put down his brushes for good.
Probably exaggerated, but it makes a point.
Totally apocryphal, likely, but it shows the impact his skill had, even as a young apprentice.
And the other story. The shield.
Ah, the Medusa shield. Classic Leonardo. A peasant gives his dad, Sir Piero, a basic round shield to get painted.
And Leonardo gets creative.
He gets weird. Inspired by Medusa, he gathers, lizards, snakes, bats, weird bits of nature, and combines them to paint this horrifying, fire-breathing monster on the shield. Apparently, it was so lifelike and terrifying, his own father jumped back when he saw it.
But his father was also sharp, wasn't he?
Very. He saw the value, gave the peasant a different shield, took Leonardo's monster shield, and sold it to an art dealer in Florence.
For how much?
100 ducats. A fortune. And the dealer then flipped it to the Duke of Milan.
So even early on, you see the technical skill, the psychological impact, and the commercial potential.
Absolutely. He knew how to make an impression.
Okay, so by 1472, he's qualified. Master in the Guild of St. Luke, age 20.
Yep. His earliest dated work is from the next year, 1473. That pen and ink drawing, the Arno Valley landscape.
Beautiful drawing. He starts getting commissions.
Big ones. An altarpiece for the government palace, the Palazzo della Signoria, then the Adoration of the Magi for some monks.
And here's where the pattern starts.
The infamous pattern. Neither gets finished.
His mind is already elsewhere.
Seems like it, pulled in a million directions. Once he solved the main compositional or technical puzzle, maybe the actual doing of it bored him.
Which leads him away from Florence to Milan, around 1482.
Right. To work for Ludovico Sforza, the Duke. And how he got the job is legendary.
The letter?
The ultimate job application letter. He writes to Sforza listing his skills.
But what does he emphasize?
Military engineering. Paragraph after paragraph about designing bridges, waterways, cannons, armored vehicles, siege engines.
Building things for war, basically.
Yes. And architecture, hydraulics.
Yeah.
Then, almost as an afterthought, way down the list.
Oh, and I can paint a bit.
Pretty much. I can also execute sculpture in marble, bronze, and clay. Likewise, in painting, I can do everything possible. It's like, yeah, that art stuff. I do that too, better than anyone, by the way.
Incredible self-marketing.
Yeah.
And he showed up playing an instrument.
A silver lyre he'd made himself, shaped like a horse's head. Again, emphasizing invention, courtly skills, music, engineering. Painting was almost secondary in his pitch.
So Milan. This Forza period, roughly 1482 to 1499, hugely productive.
Probably his most consistently productive spell, and you see that demand for his whole skill set.
He did paint some masterpieces there.
Absolutely. Virgin of the Rocks for a confraternity. And of course, The Last Supper.
Yeah.
Massive commissions.
But his day job wasn't really court painter.
Not primarily. He was more like court engineer, designer, spectacle master.
What kind of things?
Designing floats and pageants for festivals, weddings, state visits, elaborate temporary architectures, stage machinery, costumes. He also worked on designs for the dome, the cupola of Milan Cathedral. Big engineering challenges.
And the biggest challenge of all, the horse, the Grand Cavallo.
Ah, the Sforza horse. Grand obsession and ultimately a grand failure.
This was meant to be an enormous bronze equestrian statue of Francesco Sforza, Ludovico's father.
Enormous doesn't cover it. The plan was for it to dwarf the famous statues by Donatello in Padua and his own master, Verrocchio, in Venice. We're talking potentially 24 feet high.
Just the horse and rider.
Yes. He spent years on it. Countless drawings, studying horse anatomy, Figuring out the complex casting process for something that huge, he actually completed a full-size clay model.
A 24-foot clay horse. Imagine seeing that.
It must have been incredible. Stood in the courtyard of the Scorza Castle, but
It never got cast in bronze.
why? War. Always war in Renaissance Italy. In 1494, King Charles VIII of France invaded. Ludovico needed bronze desperately.
For cannons.
Exactly! All the bronze that had been set aside for Leonardo's masterpiece, maybe 70 tons of it, was requisitioned and sent to Ludovico's brother-in-law to be melted down and made into cannons to defend Milan.
Wow. The ultimate clash of art and necessity.
A perfect Renaissance moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
The dream statue becomes weaponry overnight. The French eventually use the clay model for target practice too. Total destruction.
Heartbreaking for him, surely, all that work.
Must have been devastating. Years of effort gone.
But he was still doing other major decorative work in the Sforza Castle, right? The Sala d'Alas.
Yes, around 1498, that was in the castle too. A really clever piece of illusionistic painting. Trompe-l'œil.
Deceiving the eye. What did it look like?
He made the ceiling and upper walls of this large hall look like a kind of outdoor pergola or bower.
How?
He painted these massive intertwined branches and leaves as if from 16 mulberry trees growing up the walls, their roots painted near the floor, the branches weaving together across the vaulted ceiling, forming this dense canopy with coats of arms and Sforza emblems woven in.
Making an indoor room feel like a garden grove.
Exactly, blurring that line between inside and outside, nature and architecture. Very sophisticated.
Then Sforza falls from power. The French take Milan in 1499. Leonardo has to leave.
Yep, flees Milan. But his reputation as an engineer precedes him.
Lands on his seat pretty quickly.
Remarkably quickly. By 1502, he's working for probably the most ruthless man in Italy, Cesare Borgia.
Duke Valentino, son of Pope Alexander VI. Notorious figure.
Absolutely. And Leonardo wasn't hired as an artist. He was Borgia's chief military architect and engineer.
So, back to designing fortifications and war machines.
And mapping. This is where his cartography skills really shine. He traveled all over Borgia's territories in central Italy.
To impress Borgia, he made that incredibly detailed map of Imola, right?
Yes, a town plan. It wasn't just a picture, it was a strategic tool. It showed every street, building, the fortifications, hugely valuable for military planning.
And then the map of the Chiana Valley.
Also highly accurate, very advanced for its time. It showed the river systems, the terrain, again, vital for strategy.
But wasn't that map also tied to a civil engineering project?
It was. There was a plan to build a canal from Florence to the sea, and Leonardo was involved in figuring out how to manage the water flow, possibly diverting the Arno River.
So the map served both war and peace, in a sense. Military control and civil infrastructure.
That's Leonardo, the integrated thinking. The same observational skills, the same drawing techniques, applied to completely different problems. Mapping the land to control it, whether for armies or for water.
Okay, let's swing back to the painting side for a bit. Even his unfinished paintings are revealing. St. Jerome in the Wilderness.
A really powerful piece, even though it's basically just sketched in monochrome. You mentioned the composition.
That diagonal placement, the trapezoid shape, the gaze.
And the anatomy. You can see his dissection work in the way Jerome's neck tendons are depicted. The musculature of the torso and arm. It's not just artistic convention, it's observed reality.
Clearly drawn from studying actual bodies.
No doubt. And then the lion in the foreground.
That double spiral shape with his body and tail adds dynamism.
Right. And the other big unfinished one from his first Florentine period, the Adoration of the Magi. Huge canvas.
Packed with figures, complex perspective.
Really ambitious. The preparatory drawings show his mastery of perspective, the way he uses architecture to structure the scene. Loads of figures, horses, action in the background.
But again, abandoned when he left for Milan.
Yep. It feels like maybe he solved the intellectual problems, the composition, the perspective, the interaction of figures, and then lost interest in the actual painting part.
Which seems hard to believe, but maybe true for him.
His mind was just restless. Always on to the next challenge.
Okay, the Milanese masterpiece that did get finished, sort of. The Last Supper.
Ah, yes. Painted in the dining hall of the refectory of the Santa Maria delle Grazie Monastery.
Late 1490s.
And the subject.
That incredibly dramatic moment, Jesus says, "One of you will betray me."
And Leonardo captures the explosion of emotion.
Across all 12 apostles, shock, denial, anger, suspicion, grief. Each reaction is unique, psychologically acute. He groups them in threes, creating this wave of motion emanating from Christ in the center. Masterful composition.
And the stories about him painting it are fantastic. The prior getting annoyed.
Yeah, the writer Bandello saw him work, said sometimes he'd paint nonstop all day, forget to eat.
Obsessed.
Then other times he wouldn't touch it for days, just stand there, arms folded, staring at it for hours.
Yeah.
Which drove the prior crazy. He wanted it finished.
Naturally, he kept nagging Leonardo.
And Leonardo's response?
Classic. He was struggling to find the right face for Judas, the ultimate villain. He supposedly told the Duke, half joking, half threatening, that if the prior didn't back off, he might just use the prior's face as the model for Judas.
That probably shut him up.
You'd think so. But the real tragedy of the Last Supper isn't the prior, it's the technique he used.
Right, it started falling apart almost immediately.
Yeah.
Why? He knew fresco, didn't he?
He knew traditional fresco, yes. Painting on wet plaster, buon fresco, which binds the pigment to the wall as it dries. Very durable.
But that's not what he did.
No. Fresco requires working quickly, section by section, before the plaster dries. Leonardo wanted to work slowly, revise, blend, use his oil painting techniques for subtlety. Sfumato.
So he experimented.
He did. He basically treated the drywall like a wooden panel, applied a ground layer, probably gesso or something similar, then painted on top with tempera and maybe some oil.
And the result?
Disaster. The paint didn't bond properly with the wall. It was vulnerable to moisture seeping through, temperature changes. It started flaking and deteriorating within his lifetime, or shortly after.
So ironic. One of his greatest compositions, undermined by his own experimental technique.
A constant theme, isn't it? Innovation sometimes leading to failure. It's been restored countless times, but so much of the original surface is lost.
Moving to another famous, though perhaps less instantly recognizable work, The Virgin and Child with St. Anne.
Ah, that's a fascinating composition. Really daring.
What's unusual about it?
The way the figures are arranged, you have St. Anne, Mary's mother, seated. Then Mary is basically sitting on her lap, leaning forward.
Kind of the diagonally across her.
Exactly. And Mary is reaching down towards the Christ child who's wrestling with a lamb.
The lamb symbolizing sacrifice, right?
Yes. So you have these two large female figures superimposed, interacting dynamically with the child and the symbolic lamb. It creates this complex pyramid or triangular shape full of movement and emotion.
And this influenced other artists.
Hugely. Michelangelo, Raphael, Andrea del Sarto, they all studied and adapted that complex grouping of figures. It was revolutionary.
Okay, we can't delay any longer. The Mona Lisa, La Gioconda.
The painting, everyone knows, painted roughly between 1503 and maybe as late as 1516 or 1517.
Who was she? Lisa Gherardini.
Wife of a Florentine merchant, Francesco del Giocondo, hence La Gioconda.
But what makes it the most famous painting? Technically speaking.
It's really the accumulation of techniques. First and foremost, sfumato.
Define that again. Leonardo's smoke.
It's that incredibly subtle, soft transition between colors and tones. No hard outlines. He achieved it with layers upon layers of extremely thin, translucent glazes.
Where is it most obvious?
Look at the corners of her mouth, the corners of her eyes. Everything is slightly blurred, softened. That's what creates the famous ambiguity.
The elusive smile. You can't quite pin it down.
Exactly. It seems to change depending on how you look at it. It's psychological depth achieved through pure technique.
What else? The background.
That mysterious, dreamlike landscape, different horizons on left and right, winding rivers, strange rock formations. It adds to the otherworldly feel.
And the sitter herself.
Notice how simply she's dressed. No flashy jewelry, no elaborate hairstyle. All the focus is on her face and her hands, which are beautifully rendered.
The whole effect is incredibly smooth, lifelike, yet idealized.
Vasari read that the painting was so lifelike it seemed more like flesh than paint, enough to make any other painter despair. He used incredibly fine brushes, maybe blended with his fingers. The technique is just astonishingly refined.
And he kept it with him until he died, right? Never delivered it.
Seems so. Constantly tweaking it, perhaps. It remained unfinished in some ways, like the background details.
Before we leave painting, one more tragic story.
Mm-hmm.
The Lost Mural. The Battle of Anghiari.
The great lost masterpiece. This was a huge commission around 1505 for the Palazzo Vecchio in Florence, the council hall.
And he was competing directly with Michelangelo.
Head to head. Michelangelo was commissioned to paint the Battle of Cassina on the opposite wall. Imagine that room. The two giants of the Renaissance.
What did Leonardo's depict?
The central section, which is all we really know through copies, showed this incredibly violent, dynamic scene. 4 horsemen locked in a furious struggle for a battle standard. Horses biting, men screaming. Intense energy.
So why is it lost? Another technique failure.
Sadly, yes. He tried another experiment. He was fascinated by ancient Roman painting techniques, particularly encaustic, which uses hot wax.
He tried to replicate that on a huge wall.
He did. He apparently built this massive scaffold with braziers to try and dry the wall and bind the pigments with heat. It didn't work. The color started running, dripping down the wall. It was a technical catastrophe.
So it was never really finished and deteriorated quickly.
Exactly. It was eventually painted over later in the century. All we have now are preparatory drawings and copies made by other artists, like the famous one by Peter Paul Rubens, based on Leonardo's central scene. A huge loss.
Okay, let's move from the public, often frustrating world of painting to his private world, the drawings, the journals.
This is where you really see the mind at work. Unfiltered, he was constantly drawing.
We mentioned the Arno Valley landscape, his earliest dated work. What are some other standout drawings?
Well, Vitruvian Man is technically a drawing, and it's iconic.
Study of human proportions, fitting man into the circle and square.
Right, illustrating Vitruvius. Then there are beautiful studies for paintings, like The Head of an Angel for the Virgin of the Rocks. Exquisite use of metal point.
And that big charcoal drawing in London.
The cartoon for the Virgin and Child with St. Anne and St. John the Baptist. Huge, almost finished work in itself. Shows his mastery of composition and that soft, smoky sfumato shading, even in charcoal.
I love his observational sketches of people, the caricatures.
Yes. He seemed fascinated by faces, especially unusual or grotesque ones. Vasari says he'd follow people with interesting faces around all day just to memorize them and draw them later.
Really intense observation.
But then contrasted with these incredibly beautiful, idealized drawings of young men, often associated with his pupil Salai.
The Grecian profile.
That classical ideal, yeah. He was exploring the full spectrum of human appearance, from the grotesque to the sublime.
And all this fed into and came out of the notebooks. 13,000 pages. Let's wrap our heads around that.
It's almost impossible. Surviving pages, who knows how many were lost. And the range.
You said grocery lists?
Literally. Shopping lists, reminders of debts, random thoughts, alongside profound scientific observations and detailed engineering plans.
Compositions for paintings, studies of plants, water, rock.
Anatomy, geometry, optics, mechanics, flight. He'd fill notebooks with sketches and notes on whatever caught his eye or mind that day. Continual observation and recording.
But the way he wrote, the mirror script.
Right, most of it is written in cursive from right to left and mirrored.
Why? To keep it secret.
That's the romantic theory, but probably not. He was left-handed. Writing right to left is actually physically easier for a lefty. You're pulling the pen, not pushing it, and you don't smudge the ink.
Ah, practical reason.
Most likely. Plus, he used tons of abbreviations and his own symbols. It wasn't meant to be easily read by others in its raw form.
Did he ever intend to publish this stuff?
Oh, absolutely. The notes themselves show he planned to organize them into huge, comprehensive treatises on painting, anatomy, water, mechanics, a kind of encyclopedia of everything.
But he never did.
The task is just too monumental. And he was always distracted by new projects, new observations. It never got compiled and published in his lifetime.
And after he died.
He left almost everything to his favorite pupil, Francesco Melzi. Melzi treasured them, kept them together, but after he died, his heirs didn't grasp their importance.
They got scattered, sold off, cut up.
Sadly, yes. Dispersed, rearranged, sold. That's why we have collections now like the Codex Atlanticus in Milan, a biggest single collection, but it's pages taken from many original notebooks and mounted together.
And the Codex Leicester.
That's one of the few relatively intact notebooks. Focuses on water, hydrodynamics, geology, famously owned by Bill Gates now.
So let's get into the science itself. Anatomy. He was way ahead of his time.
Centuries ahead. His understanding came from direct observation. He actually dissected human corpses.
Which was not common or easy back then.
Highly restricted, often forbidden by the church. But he got permission, probably through his connections, to dissect bodies in hospitals in Florence, Milan, Rome, maybe 30 bodies over his lifetime.
And he collaborated with a professor.
Yes, Marcantonio della Torre, an anatomy professor in Pavia. They planned a major treatise together, though the professor died young. Leonardo produced over 240 incredibly detailed anatomical drawings.
More detailed than anything before.
Far more accurate and detailed. And not just illustrating parts, but understanding function. He was basically founding biomechanics.
How so?
He studied how muscles move bones, the mechanics of joints. He drew the skeleton, the muscles, the vascular system, the nervous system, the organs.
And that famous drawing of the fetus.
One of the first scientifically accurate drawings of a fetus in utero. Astonishing. If his anatomy work had been published then, it would have transformed medical understanding overnight.
He also challenged ancient medical ideas about the heart and brain.
He did. The old Greek idea was that the heart just heated the blood, and emotions resided in brain ventricles filled with humors. Leonardo showed the heart was a muscle, a pump at the center of the circulatory system.
And the brain.
He injected wax into the ventricles of an ox brain to make a cast, showing their true shape. He realized the humors weren't there. He was using experimental methods to disprove centuries of accepted wisdom.
That glass aorta model is amazing too.
Brilliant. He wanted to understand blood flow through the aortic valve. So he made a glass model, pumped water with grass seeds through it, and watched the vortices, using fluid dynamics to understand physiology.
And he identified diseases.
He gave the first descriptions of atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, and cirrhosis of the liver, based on his dissections. Truly groundbreaking medical science.
Okay, shifting gears to engineering. He was famous for this, even in his own time.
Yes, dukes and kings hired him as much for his engineering mind as his art, maybe more so.
Flying machines. Everyone knows about those.
The ornithopter with flapping wings based on bats? Probably impossible for human power, but shows his systematic study of bird flight.
And the helicopter thing.
The aerial screw, a large helical rotor made of linen. Conceptually, it anticipates the helicopter, but it lacked an engine or a way to stop the whole machine spinning. More of a thought experiment.
What about practical military stuff?
He designed armored vehicles, often called Leonardo's tank, though it was maybe more like a mobile protected platform. Cannons, mortars, giant crossbows, siege equipment, and bridges, canal locks, hydraulic systems.
Things that Borgia and Sforza would actually want.
Exactly, and his skill wasn't just the ideas, it was how he drew them.
Technical drawing.
He practically invented modern technical drawing, clear perspectives, cross-sections, cutaways, and especially the exploded view.
Explain the exploded view again.
It's where you draw a machine with all its parts slightly separated, floating in space but aligned, showing how they fit together. Incredibly clear way to communicate complex mechanisms. Revolutionary for documenting and sharing technical designs.
His notebooks are full of these, right?
Thousands of pages. Studies of gears, levers, pulleys, bearings. A complete mechanical universe.
And this leads to that incredible story about friction, a fundamental discovery, lost.
It's a stunning example. Tribology, the science of friction. Around 1493, while investigating perpetual motion machines, which he correctly realized were impossible,
He stumbled onto something else.
he started systematically studying friction. He worked out the basic laws that friction force is proportional to the load pressing surfaces together, and it's independent of the apparent contact area.
Those are fundamental laws of physics.
Absolutely. Foundational for all mechanics and engineering. But he wrote them down in his notebook. And that was it. Never published. So they were essentially lost to science. Guillaume Emmotons had to rediscover them independently in 1699, almost 200 years later. And Emmotons usually gets the credit.
Imagine if Leonardo's findings had been known. 2 centuries of potential progress in understanding machines just vanished.
A huge what-if of scientific history.
Though it's fair to say recent research shows many of his inventions weren't totally original ideas.
That's an important nuance, yes. Things like the parachute, diving suit, even some gear mechanisms historians have found earlier concepts or rudimentary versions existed, sometimes going back centuries in different cultures.
So his genius wasn't always pure invention.
It was often more about synthesis and visualization. He took existing ideas, refined them, combined them in novel ways, and crucially, he drew them with unparalleled clarity and technical understanding. He showed how they could work, even if the technology to build them didn't exist yet. He was the ultimate integrator and illustrator of technology.
Okay, let's move towards the end of his life. Rome, 1513 to 1516.
Yep, he moves to Rome, works for Giuliano de' Medici, the Pope's brother, lives in the Vatican in the Belvedere courtyard. Prestigious setup.
But even the Pope couldn't get him to finish a painting.
Seems not. Pope Leo X supposedly gave him a commission, but Leonardo got completely sidetracked, developing a new kind of varnish for it.
Instead of actually painting.
Exactly, which led to the Pope's exasperated comment.
This man will never accomplish anything. He thinks of the end before the beginning.
A perfect summary of Leonardo's frustrating genius, perhaps. This period might also be when his health started to seriously decline. Possible strokes.
And his final move to France.
Yes, King Francis I of France was a huge admirer, invited Leonardo to come live near him at the Château d'Amboise, gave him a manor house, Clos d'Ossay, and a generous pension.
What did the king want from him? More paintings.
Apparently not much in terms of commissions. Francis just wanted Leonardo around. His title was first painter, engineer, and architect to the king. But mostly, the king just enjoyed his company, his conversation. A kind of living trophy, perhaps, but treated with immense respect.
And he was still tinkering. The mechanical lion.
Oh, yeah, that's a great story. For some royal pageant, he built this mechanical lion that could walk forward.
On its own.
Apparently so. It walked towards the king, then its chest opened up.
To reveal what?
A cluster of lilies, the emblem of France, still the master of spectacle even in his final years.
But physically, he was fading.
Definitely. By 1517, there are contemporary accounts describing a paralysis in his right hand.
Which for a right-handed world, but especially for a left-handed artist who drew constantly.
Well, he wrote left-handed, but he likely painted and drew with his right or was ambidextrous. Either way, paralysis in either hand would be crippling for his work. There's a drawing of him with his right arm bandaged or in a sling.
Likely a stroke.
This seems the most plausible explanation. This paralysis probably explains why paintings like the Mona Lisa might have remained technically unfinished in some areas. He simply couldn't do the finest details anymore. He was bedridden for the last few months of his life.
Now, his personal life, always shrouded in mystery. He didn't write much about it.
Very little directly. We know he loved animals, bought caged birds just to set them free, possibly vegetarian. But his human relationships are more speculative.
Primarily with his students, Melzi and Sully.
Those seem to be the most significant long-term relationships. Francesco Melzi came from a noble Milanese family, joined him around 1506. He was the loyal, dedicated pupil.
A favorite student. Became his principal heir.
Right. Handled his estate, preserved the notebooks initially. Then there was Sulla.
Gian Giacomo Caproti, a very different character.
Totally different. Entered Leonardo's household as a boy around 1490. Leonardo nicknamed him Sulla, meaning something like little devil or rascal. Leonardo's own notes list Sulla's faults within the first year. A thief, a liar, stubborn, and a glutton. Stole money, broke things.
Sounds like trouble.
Yet he stayed with Leonardo for 30 years, until Leonardo's death. Leonardo seems to have been incredibly indulgent towards him, bought him expensive clothes. He appears in many drawings, that Grecian profile boy.
Yeah, the nature of these relationships, Melzi and Sully.
That's been debated for centuries. Melzi himself wrote about Leonardo's feelings for his pupils being intense. Given the context, the idealized drawings, the long companionship, many historians believe these relationships were likely romantic or sexual.
And there's that court case from his youth.
Yes, the 1476 incident in Florence. Leonardo, aged 24, and 3 other young men were anonymously accused of sodomy with a known male prostitute.
What happened?
The charges were investigated but ultimately dismissed, possibly due to lack of corroborating evidence, or maybe because one of the accused was connected to the powerful Medici family.
But that accusation fueled speculation about his sexuality ever since.
It certainly did. Combined with the androgynous beauty in some of his art, like the St. John the Baptist, it has led to a widespread view of him as likely homosexual, though definitive proof is impossible. He remained unmarried, no known female partners.
He died at Clos-Seussé, France, May 2nd, 1519, age 67.
Surrounded by Melzi, presumably Sully was around too, though he inherited less than Melzi. Died a respected figure in the French court.
But even his final resting place is a bit of a mystery.
Another Leonardo puzzle. He was buried in the church of Saint Florentin at the Château d'Amboise, as per his will.
But the church isn't there anymore?
Nope. It was heavily damaged during the French Revolution, fell into ruin, and was completely demolished in the early 1800s. The graves were disturbed, bones scattered, chaos.
So his remains were lost?
For a long time, yes. Disputed. Then, in 1863, an archaeologist excavated the site.
And found what?
A partial skeleton, buried separately, with fragments of a tombstone nearby bearing inscriptions like Eos Venensis suggestive of Leonardo da Vinci. Also found a ring, details matching his likely edge at death.
And the detail about the arm.
The skeleton's right arm was folded in a particular way, which the excavator speculated might relate to the paralysis Leonardo suffered before death. Based on all the circumstantial evidence, these remains were reinterred in the chapel of Saint Hubert, a smaller chapel still standing at Amboise.
But it's still presumed remains. Not 100% certain.
Exactly. The plaque acknowledges the uncertainty. There have been ongoing efforts, even recently, using DNA analysis.
Trying to compare it to DNA from living relatives.
Yeah.
Or traces on his artwork.
Both have been proposed or attempted, trying to finally confirm if the bones in Saint Hubert really are Leonardo's. The mystery continues.
So, summing up this incredible figure, Universal geniuses seems about right.
It does. Art historian Helen Gardner called his mind superhuman. The French critic Taine said there's maybe no other example of a genius. So universal, so incapable of fulfillment, so full of yearning for the infinite, so far ahead of his own century.
He seems almost remote because of that vastness.
Mysterious, yeah. But the core takeaway for us, I think, has to be that seamless integration of art and science.
They weren't separate boxes for him.
Not at all. He used scientific observation, anatomy, optics, mechanics to make his art more truthful, more powerful, and he used his artistic skill drawing, modeling, to record and understand his scientific investigations.
Art informed by science, science rendered through art.
Perfectly put. He embodied that Renaissance humanist ideal, perhaps more completely than anyone else, and unquenchable curiosity driving it all.
So, the final thought to leave our listeners with.
Well, think about all those discoveries we talked about. The anatomy, the understanding of blood flow, the engineering principles, the laws of friction, groundbreaking stuff.
Decades, even centuries ahead of their time.
Right. But because he didn't publish, because it was all locked away in those thousands of pages of mirror script notebooks.
It had almost no impact on the actual progress of science at the time.
Virtually none. It all had to be rediscovered later by others. So the provocative question is, what if?
What if he had published?
What if Leonardo, instead of hoarding his knowledge, had shared even a fraction of it with the world? How different would the history of science, medicine, technology have been? How much faster might things have progressed?
It's staggering to think about. All that knowledge kept secret, effectively lost for generations.
A truly profound loss, hidden in plain sight within those incredible notebooks, makes you wonder what else might still be waiting to be fully understood.